Hello everyone and welcome to Lockdown 2.0. It's crazy how we went from like 1 week all being together, I don't know what it was, a couple of hundred of us or something in the hall, all planning our weekends, the rest of the week, whatever, and then boom, like the rug pulled from underneath us and the face of the island changed in that moment. The good news is we're still able to meet online, although it's going to look different, but it does mean that we're not isolated. We are still in community, trying to work out these early weeks of lockdown together. And what we've decided to do is to definitely carry on with the Kingdom series. The thing we've been pushing in this series is that the Kingdom of God speaks into every aspect of our life, whether or not it's when we spend time on our own, family, friends, workplaces, our creativity, absolutely everything. And so for us to stop the series because we can't meet together on a Sunday would just be ridiculous. But what we are going to do is instead of being like one long talk of say half hour to 40 minutes on a Sunday, we're going to break them into 3 smaller chunks throughout the week. And we're hoping that this will make it, it's going to be a little bit more informal. And we're also hoping that actually it can be almost more of a study where people can sit, maybe, listen with the Bible open, pen, paper, go through it. And then there'll be some questions you can ask yourself, ask your family members or whoever you live with. And I just want to say, I appreciate coming from a family of 2 young kids. Some of you guys will be listening to this with a kid hanging off each hip. Some of you will be still, key workers going into work, and it might be you're listening to this in your ears. So everyone's in very different positions during this lockdown. But where you can, I just encourage you to kind of step into these studies rather than kind of just listen in the background, and continue to read the book of Matthew during this time. If you're looking for something to read, I think that will stand all of us in good stead. So where we're up to this week is looking at the first disciples that Jesus called by name. So quick definition really, or understanding of what a disciple is. It's the standard definition of disciple, which is a noun, is someone who adheres to the teachings of another. It is a follower or a learner. It refers to someone who takes up the ways of someone else. And so applying this to Jesus, a disciple is someone who learns from him and to live like him. And when we say learn from him, what we're going to realize as we go through this series more and more, this is not just historically learn from him as if he was a past sort of dead figure, but actually we'll learn to engage with God in the here and now through the word, through him speaking to us, actually about how do we follow him specifically with the things he's calling us to do bit by bit. So if you want to click pause, you can. You're going to go and grab a Bible, feel free. And we're going to be in Matthew 4, starting at verse 18. Okay, so here we go. So it's titled, Jesus Calls the First Disciples. While walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Immediately they left their nets and followed him. And going on from there, he saw 2 other brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, in the boat with Zebedee, their father, mending their nets, and he called them. Immediately they left the boat and their boat and their father and followed him. That is, following Jesus. So the first thing really that stands out there is it says Simon, who was also called Peter. It's quite an odd thing that we wouldn't really hear about people in this day and age. You wouldn't say Michael, also known as Pedro or something like that. It's quite a weird concept actually. When we look at it in those times, not only does it make sense in terms of that context, but actually it tells us a lot about what it is to be called as a disciple within the kingdom. So what Jesus here is emphasizing is it's like a nickname. He's saying actually you have been Simon and you have lived a certain way, but Jesus is saying I see you as Peter. And Peter, the Greek word there is Petros, and it means like rock. And he's just saying although Simon, everyone else sees you as this kind of outspoken, disloyal, kind of guy, he's saying actually no, what I see in you is that you will be a rock. And Jesus takes him on this journey of calling him a rock and helping him grow into that new kingdom identity that he has. And on the first week when we looked at the kingdom, we spoke about the thing called the fall, which happened in Genesis, which was when creation turned their back on God, went their own way, and the world became fractured. So not only did sickness and death and everything else sort of come into the world at that point, and this kingdom was broken, it also means who we are, how we function, how we see ourselves. That too is all completely fractured and broken. And what Jesus is saying goes, as I'm redeeming this community, this kingdom, it will be of a community of people who I'm also redeeming. And part of the redemption for Simon is Jesus saying to him, he goes, in this broken kingdom, you may be Simon, this outspoken, always ready to act, before sometimes you really think this through kind of guy. And he says, actually, in this new kingdom now, it's being redeemed. I too am redeeming you, and I'm going to call you Peter, which means rock, which is really ironic for someone who's so flippant and very, very unreliable. But Jesus sees something in him, and that's what it's first thing we're getting from this text about becoming a disciple. And you're going to see actually as we go on this. Peter is going to have to keep, like that word we looked at, repenting. He's going to have to keep changing his thinking, because Jesus now has a plan for him as a disciple. He says, I expect you to be a rock, and I want you to grow into this person who you now are. But sometimes he still functions as Simon. And so Jesus continually working with him say, no, we're saying no more to Simon. We're saying yes to Peter, because this is who you are. And that will be a personal battle for him. And probably we can say it's a real personal battle for us to step into who we really are. And so what this also does for us is it shows us the lens of how we should see ourselves and should also see other people. So Simon would have been known by the others by his behaviour. He would have had some form of reputation, and that's how people would have seen him, through that lens, a very worldly viewpoint, which is you behave like that and so I see you like this. Whereas Jesus turns up and introduces the kingdom, and he says, despite your behaviour and despite the reputation you may have amongst your colleagues, family and friends, he goes, in the kingdom I see you differently. I see you, and I'm going to see you through that lens, and that's the lens I'm going to choose to see you through. And so really the question for us is, how do you see yourself? Is it in light of the world, which is completely built on maybe some behaviours you struggle with, or reputation maybe you've carried for years and years? Or do you allow the way you see yourself to be in light of the kingdom, of how Jesus sees you? And then the second thing to think on the back of that is, well, how do you see other people? Do you always see them and treat them in light of their behaviour, or do you allow what God thinks about them to be your lens, a kingdom lens for how you see them, what you call them to, and what you expect of them? It's really, really, it's a subtle thing to see that his name's been changed. But actually when we unpack this and realise what it means, it's absolutely huge. And I just want to say as well, if this comes back, I think a lot of it comes back to the identity thing that we looked at on week 2, of how you step into the kingdom is in humility, and how you function in the kingdom is with the identity we have, which is found in Christ, which means we're sons and daughters. And if you don't get who you are, then the ability to call someone out of the behaviour they are, if you're functioning here, to call them out and say, I see you as actually greater than what you currently are. But you look at it from an earthly perspective, which is, oh, hang on a sec, they might be elevated or achieve more with their life than what I think I can. And you think, well, I don't like that. And so you never quite call them, and it's almost more comfortable to keep them there. But when you realise, it says in Ephesians that we are seated with Christ, which is like there is no higher place that our identity could be, to be sons and daughters seated with Christ in the heavenlies, then actually there is no promotion above that. So no matter what our life looks like here, it can never be higher or lower than that. That's a secure thing. And so when you grasp that, it means with the people around you, you continually call them to greatness. Even if on the earth it looks like they may achieve more than you, it means your name might not get recognised, but theirs does. But this was of no concern to Jesus at all. He said, I see you as the rock. And he said to Peter, he goes, actually, you're going to be the leader of this group, even though his behaviour was a million miles from it. He said, I want to call you to be the leader of this group. And he continually made much of Peter to help him grow into who he wanted to be. And he didn't mind when the disciples started functioning out of who they were and people were noticing the disciples. You never saw Jesus wanting to climb to the front of the group and say, oh, it was me, because he was secure in who he was, which meant he could call out the gold and the greatness in those people who were around him. And now moving on, I want to think not just about how we see ourselves and how we see other people, but actually how do we actually treat them, and do we live this out? And it's so easy in one sense to read the Bible. In one sense, that's not difficult, but to take on what it means to really be a kingdom disciple, which means to live like Jesus, learn from him and live it out, it's actually sometimes very difficult. But when you see it done around you, it's a beautiful and powerful thing. And I know for me, when I was at one particular church in Kingston and we were planting out to a new borough in Croydon, the guy who was leading the church, a guy called Actor, who's actually going to be sharing on this series at some point for us as well, and he still functions very much as like a mentor to me today. I was being planted out to lead Croydon, and in front of the entire congregation, Actor called me onto the stage. And he said, our prayer for you, Michael, is that you will go further and do more in Croydon than what we would ever achieve in Kingston. And I thought, wow, what a powerful way to be released by someone who you see as a mentor, not sort of insecure, thinking, I don't want you to achieve more than me, but actually to be a disciple is to push the other people on around you in the same way that Jesus continues to do it to yourself. And the verse he quoted to me as he sent us out to Croydon as a team was from John 14:12. And this is the verse that Jesus says to his disciples. He says, very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these. So Jesus is saying, I've done a certain amount of works, but my plan for you is for you to specifically for Peter, is to be this rock, is to go and actually do even greater things. And then you see this with the disciples as well. And the other disciples, he was continually pushing them on to do more and more and more. And we need to be doing that for the people who are around us. Okay, so let's look at this next question specifically. How do you see or treat the other people around you? And is it how Jesus sees and treats you? Because we can't receive one thing from Jesus, but be unwilling to put it in practice to the people around us, because that's not what this is saying here with discipleship. To be a kingdom disciple is to learn from him, but to then also put it into practice as well. So what I want to ask you to do this week is maybe grab a pen and paper and just maybe jot some names down of some people that you feel God is speaking to you about, or just people, even just simple prayer. God, what names do you want me to put down on a bit of paper? And some of the names might be crazy. You might think, I haven't even seen this person for 10 years and the relationship was left a bit under a cloud. It may be people you're in church with. It might be colleagues, friends, family. Just jot the names down on paper. Go with it. Whoever you feel God's given you, jot the name down. And then from that moment, ask him to tell you, like in prayer, what he wants to say about that person. The same way he saw, I don't want you to be Simon, you're a Peter and you'll be a rock, their kingdom identity. What identity, what thing does God want to call those list of people in? I want to encourage you with this verse. This is in 1 Corinthians 14:1. This is what Paul writes to a kind of excited but very dysfunctional church. And that's an encouragement, because we realise more and more with this kingdom series, Jesus is not on the lookout for superheroes. The people he calls are like your very everyday people. They're just willing to follow him. And so no matter what your life looks like, if what your heart is saying is, I want to follow you, you're in the right place to be a great kingdom disciple. But Paul writes this to this church. He says, pursue love and earnestly desire the spiritual gifts, especially that you may prophesy. And that was to the whole church. He didn't just call a few special people out. To the whole church, it was this gift to be able to hear from God and speak into the very situations that are around you, or things that you may see happening in the future. So take a risk at being a kingdom disciple this week by doing that. And here's another helpful verse. This is in Romans 12:10. Again, the Apostle Paul writing to a church, he says, love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in honour. So some questions for to close. How do you see yourself? Because Peter had to go on that journey. He probably saw himself as this slightly wild, outspoken, read the life about him and come up with your own words. But he had to go on this journey of saying, gosh, there's this guy who I'm now going to follow. He doesn't see me as that anymore. He wants to change my name to be a rock. He had to go on that journey. And then the second one is, how do you see and treat others around you? Is it with a kingdom lens, or actually is it with a worldly lens whereby you treat them based on their behaviour, their reputation? Or actually is it this kingdom lens, which is actually God? How do you see this person? How can I encourage them? How can I encourage them in the same way that you've encouraged me? You've changed who I am. How can I speak change into their life as well? And just remember, in lockdown, we're all going to find ourselves in different situations. Some of us will be at home with friends, family. Some of us will find ourselves still going out at work. Whatever it is, the kingdom of God can be brought into every single aspect of life. So continue to tune into this series bit by bit. Take notes, get into the Bible verses yourself. And I just want to encourage you as well that if you're just in a place where you're thinking, I can't see God moving, I don't know what to be thinking, I'm struggling to connect with him, then if you go on maybe something like YouTube, there's that great song called Waymaker, and some of the lyrics in it are along the lines of, it's, and I think even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. It's along those lines of, actually, I trust that you are at work. God is way bigger than this lockdown, and this does not alter his plans to bring the kingdom in amongst Guernsey. It will probably just be done in a different way. So I hope this is of some sort of blessing to you guys today. Share it maybe in life groups or however best you want to learn from it. And I look forward to sharing some more material with you guys on Sunday. Okay, have a great week. Bye-bye.